everybody. Welcome back to Spine and Ink. I'm Meg.
And I'm Mari.
And today we have a fun little specific video for you.
Yes, we wanted to talk, being that it's February and it is Black History Month, we wanted to talk about a few authors that were just really influential in their genre specifically today. We are gonna cover a few more just in general, in some like reels and shorts and stuff. So today is predominantly women. But we're only covering 4 genres, so I know I'm like, oh, for all the genres, but it's just 4 today just to kind of keep this video digestible. But we're going to talk about more for sure. These are kind of just brief summaries about them and kind of like why they were so important, what, their specific works were, or I guess their most important ones, that kind of thing. So,
yeah. We felt like it was really important this month specifically to highlight Black authors. And of course, because we're women, specifically Black women, always deserve all of the love. And anybody that we mention in this podcast, I will list in the show notes down below some places where you can find their works. If you wanted to read any of it, please do. We would recommend you do, and we definitely will be as well. So
yes. Per usual, we encourage you to do a lot of your own research, kind of dig deeper not only into these women but just Black authors in general. I know Goodreads kind of has a section right now. They're doing some different like achievements that you can accomplish by reading specific books, and they do have one for Black authors for this month, so look at those books as well. Those are newer authors, and here a lot of these are authors from years ago. One of them is from more recent.
For our trusty little paper of information that we'll be passing back and forth. So yes. I'm going to kick us off with poetry. We're going to be talking about Phyllis Wheatley. She's the first African-American woman to publish a book of poems, and she's only the 3rd American woman to do so, which is awesome. She was born in around 1753.
Not 100% sure when. 100% sure
exactly
looked really deeply, and everyone was like, around now. So
yeah, I mean 1753. That's
I was like, we're
forever
not
ago.
100%. But
she was brought to America by enslavers in 1761 and bought by the Wheatley family, who taught her to read and write, which is actually kind of unique of them to teach her how to read and write.
I was gonna say, I didn't want to include like her entire life story just because then this would get really long, but like please do more research. It was really interesting. It was kind of a unique situation. She was definitely still enslaved. I'm not excusing that.
Yeah.
But it is a very unique situation where the family did decide that they were going to educate her. They encouraged her to read, write. They were really encouraging, which is unique. And also Mrs. Wheatley, I don't know if I put it on there, as she kind of was going along her publishing journey, they actually did help her a lot financially, and just physically. At that time, obviously, we know prejudice was unbelievable. And so it was like near impossible to be published as a Black author or writer, let alone a woman. And so they also did help her a lot there. But continue.
Yeah, on top of reading and writing, it says she was also immersed in the Bible, geography, astronomy, history, British literature, and many Greek and Latin classics, which I'm sure is probably where she really got involved in poetry, especially with like Greek and Latin work. It was all very much written in prose back then. So that would be cool. After 6 years, she published her first poem in 1767. In 1772, she had run advertisements in Boston newspapers looking for subscribers. After no success finding an American publisher, she traveled to London to publish her book Poems on Various Subjects, Religious and Moral, in 1773. It was the first book to be written by an enslaved Black woman in America and included one of her most famous poems titled On Being Brought from Africa. I feel like I've actually heard
I was going to say, it's a really common one. I feel like we definitely studied it in high school. We both had like similar teachers or the same teachers. I feel like
I've definitely heard
I think our English teacher
of that poem
did teach that one, or one of them. But I was reading it online and I was like, I've definitely read this before, whether it was in school or not.
Shortly after her publication, she was emancipated and tried to publish a second book, but unfortunately was unsuccessful due to continued prejudice. And since we know that her, family was, or the family that she was enslaved to, was very helpful in publishing her first book, I'm sure that lack of like financial help probably was, made it near impossible for her to continue writing. But she did continue to write poetry and is still studied in schools worldwide, classrooms, which is probably why we know her work.
I was going to say. Let's see, who do I have next? So this is an author who's a little more recent. You can check out her personal website, which is where I got a lot of information about her specifically, and did a lot of research. We're going into the sci-fi fantasy world of things. She's still writing, so I would definitely encourage you to read either her older works or her newer ones, whatever ones sound interesting to you. You can see all of her books and the synopses on her website. But this is N.K. Jemisin. I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's Jemisin, so I'm going to say Jemisin. So she was the first Black author to win a Hugo Award for Best Novel. Quickly, if you don't know what the Hugo Awards are, they're considered the most prestigious awards in sci-fi and fantasy. They happen annually, kind of like the Oscars for sci-fi fantasy. So super duper major, and she actually won 3 for her Broken Earth trilogy. So she won back-to-back Hugo Awards and has been widely loved by readers of a million different demographics as well. So I definitely encourage you to look into those books specifically. But N.K. Jemisin lives and writes in New York, so she's a New York author. Fairly common in this. I think one of the other ones, LCB Washington, was also in New York. And she was also a counseling psychologist and educator. She loves to hike and bike, and is also an anti-racist, feminist, and political blogger. So I did not get a chance to really dig deep into her blog, but I plan on doing so. I encourage you to do the same.
We'll include it in the show notes.
Yes. But the Broken Earth trilogy that won those 3 Hugo Awards, she is the first author to ever win 3 in a row for Best Novel. I am just going to read you guys a quick synopsis for the first book of that trilogy to see if you're interested. I am really hoping that I'm pronouncing these names right. Sci-fi and fantasy names are always a big struggle for me. Sorry, so I apologize in advance. 3 terrible things happen in a single day. Essen, a woman living an ordinary life in a small town, comes home to find that her husband has brutally murdered their son and kidnapped their daughter. Meanwhile, mighty Sansa, really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, the world-spanning empire whose innovations have been civilization's bedrock for 1,000 years, collapses as most of its citizens are murdered to serve a madman's vengeance. And worst of all, across the heart of the vast continent known as the Stillness, a great red rift has been torn into the heart of the earth, spewing ash enough to darken the sky for years, or centuries. Now Essen must pursue the wreckage of her family through a deadly dying land without sunlight, clean water, or arable land, and with limited stockpiles of supplies. There will be war all across the Stillness, a battle royale of nations not for power or territory, but simply for the basic resources necessary to get through the long, dark night. Essen does not care if the world falls apart around her. She'll break it herself if she must to save her daughter. So, yeah, I said that sounds really, really good. Once I looked at the covers, they look familiar. So,
okay.
This sounds like a really, really interesting fantasy sci-fi series for us to read. It would be cool to buddy read, being that it's a completed trilogy. But I also was looking at some of her newer works, and those also look really interesting.
I love a completed series.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love that it's
Don't have to wait.
We don't have to wait. And again, it's won so many awards. Everyone has had good things to say about it. And she's, like I said, still writing and releasing new books. Her most recent novel is The World We Make, which also sounded really interesting to me.
I think I've heard of that one.
Yes. And so I think maybe that would be a good one to read too. She is a little bit more recent. Again, I think her first Hugo Award was in 2016, I believe. So, more recent one, still incredibly influential. So I definitely, again, encourage you to do some research. Look at her blog for sure.
2016 is so sad that it took that long to win an award.
Yes.
It took that long for a Black woman to win. That's, 10 years ago? Not even. 9 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Math. Yeah. Not good at math. Anyways, moving on to romance. LCB Washington is considered the first Black author to write a romance novel. Obviously, that might not be 100% accurate. There might have been authors prior, but she's recognized as the first Black author to write a romance novel.
At least traditionally published.
Yeah, traditionally published. But I'm sure there's more. And if you know any more information about that, please leave it in the comments. We always want to know. She attended City College of New York, becoming a journalist for the New York Post and Essence soon after she became the first Black woman to report for Life.
So
that's really cool.
Isn't that cool? Not only was she the first Black author of a romance novel, she was also the first Black woman to report for Life magazine.
I can't imagine being a Black woman back in the day being a reporter. Like, you would not, that would be when it wasn't so even that long ago,
because that book was published in 1980.
I mean, even in the 80s,
even in the 80s, no matter what. I
would be scared to be a journalist in the 80s. A woman in the 80s, I'd be scared to be a woman. I'd be scared to be a woman. And then to be a Black woman reporting would be so hard.
Yeah.
While working as an editor for Newsweek, she published her one and only romance novel, Entwined Destinies, in June of 1980 under the pen name Rosalind Wells. I think that's how you...
Yeah, it's Wells.
Yes.
I'm assuming it's Wells.
I would say Wells. Rosalind Wells. The synopsis of that book, I'll give you a short little breakdown. Kathy Godwin is an up-and-coming reporter for a London-based magazine. While covering a major oil business conference, she meets tall, dark, and devastating Lloyd Craig, a top echelon executive with Transglobal Oil. His response to her, as well as her questions, can best be described as cold and sarcastic, and she wonders how he can dislike her when he doesn't even know her. Lloyd's reaction to the petite beauty is an immediate, intense desire to possess her. Though he's determined to fight his attraction to Kathy, he can't help asking her out or stealing a few searing kisses and tender embraces. Despite his growing feelings for her, Lloyd knows they can never be more than friends, that he can never be free from his wounded past to commit to the only woman he'll ever love. The banter.
Yeah. I said, ooh.
The banter.
It's really good.
Yeah, that sounds good.
It's just so sad because I'm like, I didn't know about any of these
I know.
Or poems before this. I mean, maybe that one. But I was reading the synopsis for this book and I was like,
sounds awesome.
Sounds really good.
Okay, well, we'll read it. We'll get back to you. In 2002, Black Issues Book Review deemed the novel the first known romance featuring African-American characters written by an African-American author.
So,
in 2002?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Though, to be fair, again, this book was
it came out in the 80s.
And so I think it was just deemed that in 2002.
Yeah, but for that to be like deemed,
yeah,
that's crazy to have the first
and
African American
I'm sure
characters.
There are plenty more before it, but I think we're just talking traditionally published.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, no matter what, it's insane.
LCB Washington did unfortunately pass away in May of 2009, but her legacy lives on through not only her novel, but also her previous works and activism through them. So definitely look into her work. We will link the book below.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
On to you.
And this is the last one we're going to be covering in this episode. It's just, again, short little one. I think maybe we'll post all of these little segments as reels.
Yeah.
And then continue to post more. So if you're interested, check out our Instagram. We will continue to talk about more Black authors and their stories, probably still predominantly women. We'll get back to you on that. We'll see. But for the last one, we're going to talk about a mystery author, Pauline Hopkins, who's considered one of the first African-American authors of mystery fiction. I'm sure there are plenty before and after. We're talking traditionally published novels, and she's just one of the first. So she was not only a novelist, but also a playwright, journalist, feminist, historian, editor, and activist for African-American rights. She was also a major supporter of the arts as well. Just an interesting fact that I found while researching, according to MIT, many have credited her novel Of One Blood as the inspiration for the setting of Wakanda in the Black Panther series.
Oh, whoa.
Which, again, had no idea.
Yeah.
I was kind of just digging this MIT article. I just happened upon as like one of the last places I was looking, and that was just kind of at the bottom. But I just thought that was really interesting that these are stories that I didn't know about, knew nothing about. And then also, according to one of the Goodreads descriptions of her novel, Hagar's Daughter, her works The Slave's Escape and The Underground Railroad are some of the earliest known literary treatments of slaves escaping to freedom. But I'm going to talk about Hagar's Daughter, which is her mystery fiction that is kind of the most well-known of her works. It's considered a classic by a lot of people, as well as the first African-American mystery novel, and it was first published in 1902 under the pen name Sarah A. Allen. Something to note, a lot of these have pen names, but now are just recognized under their actual names. But if you're trying to look for these books, you might have to look up those pen names. So that's kind of just why we're stating those. Quick little synopsis. It features the first African-American woman detective, Venus Johnson, a maid who investigates the murder of a white woman. While celebrating African-American values, the novel is critical of the racial discrimination of the time in the United States. So early 1900s, still, unfortunately, incredibly relevant. So I highly recommend that you read this book. I would really like to, like I said, I want to read more mysteries, so I feel like it would be good for me to start with this one and relevant. But that's kind of just a little tiny tidbit about her. So,
yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So those are our highlights for the week. Like we said, we will continue posting more shorts about other Black authors, predominantly women, because we feel like that's important to highlight, but we might throw some other people in there. I guess some other books I would recommend reading that I personally have read. If you have not read Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, it's by Mildred B. Taylor. I think about that book all the time. It's about a family in the South, I believe in the 50s or 60s.
It's been a while since you've read it.
Yeah,
right?
it's
In
been a
school.
while since I've read it. I read it when I was in college.
Oh, okay.
Again, because I was in a play that had to do with a lot of Black history, and like we were learning a lot about the KKK and the history of that, and like so I reread that book. Really, really good. I did read it for the first time in middle school, so I think it is more for young adults. So if you have kids or you want to read something with your family to support Black history, that's a really good one. And then I also read The Hate You Give. The Hate You Give, Angie Thomas. I read that book back during Black Lives Matter in 2020, but it's still, I mean, it's always relevant. Another kind of more young adult, so it is family friendly. Yeah, those are my two that I still think about very, very often. I know The Hate You Give is a lot more, I know that was more in the mainstream, but personally, coming from a white girl, that one was really influential to me, especially at the time that I read it. So, would highly recommend. Yeah.
I wish I could speak more on like books by Black authors about Black characters. I unfortunately in school was not really required to read many. It just kind of happened that way with the classes I took. I was in and out of like advanced honors and then just like basic English classes, and so every time I kind of moved around, I missed the teachers that would require them. No matter what, I feel like every teacher should. I just somehow missed it. So I have a lot of work to do, I will say. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't really, really like to or think that is beneficial for me. Like we've talked about in our intro episode, I only really started like reading personally past 2 years, and it's been all contemporary romance, which again is predominantly white authors. So I would like to do a bit of work on that myself. I'm probably going to start with some of these works and then move on to some of the more modern books. I have Dear Martin, which is a really, really short one. I got it a while ago. Never ended up reading it yet, but I feel like this one would be a really quick read. I've heard really, really incredible things about it. I feel like it would be really relevant, especially now. So I think that might be my next one for sure. Like I said, I just have a lot of work to do personally. Unfortunately, my education was not what it should
failed
have
us,
been.
but
it failed me.
That's why we felt like this was
immensely,
important,
yeah.
because we read all the time, and yet these are just like not as well known or as highlighted of authors. And sometimes you really have to search it out and find it yourself rather than it finding you. It was important for us to talk about it this month, and we will be doing a lot of work, and we hope that you all choose to do work with us. And yeah, so
it is February, it is Black History Month, but we definitely encourage you to continue to support Black authors, continue to read Black stories, especially right now. I think it's incredibly relevant. Please,
yes.
please continue your research, continue your reading outside of just February. This shouldn't be the only time.
Chose right now to highlight it, but the work never stops. So,
Yes.
And with that, we will keep sharing, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave us comments. Please, 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 if you have any more Black authors that you love, or if you have any books that have great Black and brown representation, then please send it our way. And we always love to find new things to read, expand our horizons. So, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you very soon.
We will see you next week.
Goodbye.